Thank you for tuning in again to Bold Like a Leopard here on YouTube. This is me, Ramon, again, as usual. And we're going to be discussing some bad news and probably some more bad news. But first of all, programming note. I was supposed to have a chat earlier with Mikhail, who is an activist for the Republicans here in Ohio. I'm not a Republican, but you know, I've been trying to talk to some people of that nature for a while and kind of figure out exactly what the hell is wrong with that party. I think we're both in agreement, me and this friend of mine, that all is not well with that party. And the sooner they become truly a party that represents their voters, I think that we'll have a real system that's a representative democracy. Okay. Um, there's plenty of people who are fine with the two-party system and would like to, I guess turn our country into basically, a plutocracy. But I'm not fine with it. I think that we do need really a change in the way both of the parties work. For one thing, we're going to be discussing the Central Committee of the Ohio Party. I think that the fact we have to elect a committee in order to tell us who to vote for, that's one of the reasons I don't become active in this party. I'm not active in the Libertarian Party either. And I think more people are waking up to the fact that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans nor any of these other people are really representing anybody besides a number of corporate, corporate backers, lobbyists, whatever you want to call them. I see Bandsaw Bandits here. Thanks for tuning in again. I think maybe remind me. I think we were supposed to talk about something one time. It was Gallipoli, but I think there was something else you wanted to talk about. I know something's heating up down under. I can never remember whether it's you or Floyd that's from Australia or from New Zealand. So sorry about that. Floyd is here. Pinochet is here. I think by Floyd's remark, it's pretty clear that Bandsaw is the Australian and Floyd is the New Zealander. So, Friday, it's going to be probably 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's U.S. We're going to be talking to Mikhail. And I'm going to be discussing an experience I had earlier this evening. A couple experiences. So first of all, I am a religious Jew. I'm not one of these secular people. Okay, I guess people have a right to believe in God or not, but I do believe that in the Jewish religion. I can't say that I totally understand it. I can't say that I totally agree, in full with every single statute in it. There's certain things that I think are kind of I don't know if I could really adjust to living in that type of society. So, because I grew up in a society like yours that was English speaking, Western values, and I'm upfront enough to say, I'm fine with living in a Western country, but today is the holiday of Purim, and those of you that don't know what it is, basically I think this was about 400 years before Christ. What the hell are safas? We have heaps of safas. Are those animals or something? I think it's either an animal or a food. I'm looking at some stuff in the chat. But anyway, the holiday happened. It concerns some events in Persia in ancient history before Alexander the Great, if that helps you. And the Israelites had been exiled to both Babylon and Persia. And essentially, there was, an event that happened. This was under, Emperor Xerxes, and he had a minister named Haman, who was he actually decreed to kill all the Jewish residents and citizens of the Persian Empire, subjects, I guess you would call them, throughout the entire Persian Empire. So that's stretching from, Turkey all the way to pretty much India, and including Egypt. So he had in mind that he would kill all of them. And the story is pretty much about how the oh, I see what it says. Safas are South African. So we're going to get to that. That's a very important. And I'm as I'm talking about this, I'm actually thinking about a link between that and this ridiculous story from South Africa. Um, so he said, yeah, we're going to kill them all, take all their stuff, and basically it's going to be a huge party. So the queen had been, the story is about how the queen was a Jewish woman named Esther, who ended up getting married because the first wife of King Xerxes, Emperor Xerxes, displeased him, so he had her. I think she was just banished. She wasn't hung or anything. Um, you need to do a flat Earth debate, Ramon. I could. I don't know. I saw Stefan Molyneux. That was hilarious. Um, so that's Bandsaw Bandit. Yeah, the flat Earth stuff. Uh, don't get me started. In a few weeks, hopefully, I have a story to talk to you about the flat Earth debate. Um, it's not quite the time yet, so just trust me. But uh, moving on, yes. So the Queen Esther, she actually became married to Xerxes due to his becoming displeased with Vashti, who was the first empress of the Persian of his. I wouldn't say she's the first empress of Persia, but um, and then she basically was told by her uncle. I think her uncle was Mordecai. You might have heard that name. Johnny Depp made a stupid movie called Mordecai recently. He was told by her, well, you're going to have to, tell Xerxes that if Haman wants all of us killed, that means he wants you killed too. And pretty much that was the story. We read the Megillah. That's a scroll in the synagogue, and every single Jewish person is commanded to listen to it. So all of these debates, and I know a lot of you might not think that this is that important of a story today, because I know many of you have different issues that you're interested in, but so much of the Jewish religion is just shoved aside due to the Jewish culture, or there's people who Larry David, for example. I think he's a fantastic comedian. All of his content is about Jewish culture. It has nothing to do with our actual scriptural heritage, and the Bible is our scriptural heritage. um, you could say that much of the New Testament, I guess, is too, even though I don't read the New Testament. But plenty. Absolutely. I mean, think about it, plenty of central characters in the New Testament were Jews. I mean, there's no way around that. And then due to this secularism that's developed in American Jewish society, and there's certainly aspects of my life that have been formed by that. People lose sight about the real heritage that they have. Um, Pinochet says, I've actually been looking into the rabbinic and the others. Well, maybe someday. You guys. I mean, first of all, you can always comment on my videos. You can send me questions. I can look them up. Maybe one day I'll host somebody if anybody's interested in it, because I think that all of this classification, this identity classification of people as Jews by ethnicity or by culture, I think it's a false argument. I look at it as more of a religion. Yes, there are national and cultural aspects to it, but in my opinion, they're meaningless without the belief system. The belief system is very important. I think other countries and other cultures do have belief systems to them, but they're not so obvious, right? What's the belief system of the Spanish people? Well, it is Catholicism, right? But it's kind of a type of Catholicism. Um, you can go down the list. What's the belief system of New Zealand? I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know anything about it. Um, Pinochet says we're crawling with Jews here, U.S. Yeah, sure are, sure are. Yeah, but I don't take any offense to that. um, but yeah, we've got we've got a lot of people they would rather talk in terms of identity and race and ethnicity than talk about actual beliefs. That's why um, Pinochet says, "Oh, you picked up on that one." But so I think here's a parallel, okay? And I think Pinochet will appreciate it. A lot of people they become so enamored with socialism and communism not because of the actual belief and the equality of all mankind and the redistribution of wealth. Although yes, there are people that truly do believe in that, and that's up to them. But they do it because of the symbolism. There's the hammer and the sickle and the whole youth thing and going together in unison. There's all the artwork. It's in every single communist country, and ones that are so sort of communist. You get that type of artistic flavor. You have Shea and whatever. Pinochet is putting the commies in the parentheses. Well, I mean, okay, so are the Vietnamese Jews too? I don't think so. Are the who are what's the other country that Peru. There was a massive insurgency in Peru. Those weren't Jews. A lot of those people were indigenous Indians. Okay, that was a Maoist insurgency. So while I do accept the fact that there were a number of Jewish people involved in a number of communist movements, and I think that they're basically idiots, and I don't really. I mean, to me, those people are basically selling out everything that Judaism is about. Okay. Uh, Religious teachings of any nature open a big can of worms, so you never can get to the bottom. Sure, but if you discuss them in an open and exploratory manner or inquisitive manner, and you're not trying to force people into any sort of belief system, I don't see any harm in that. Like the way I look at it, I don't need somebody to believe in God as I believe in God, because in a certain way, he appears to people in different forms. You know, there were plenty of instances in the Bible where there were contradictory messages or whatever. Um, but there's also a problem when you get into religious conversations when people start saying, "No, your belief system is heretical. Your belief system is a complete perversion of what we believe in." Yeah, yeah. In certain cases, they are perversions, but when you bring coercion into religion by calling something a heresy, it can become really. Hold on, I'm sure I've heard you curse, Bull. Of course I curse. Yeah. What does that have to do with anything? we're talking about religion. I'm not talking about making you religious, but we're talking about religion. And I talk about religions sometimes I talk about religions that I don't believe in. So am I now allowed to talk about religions that I don't believe in? Like Buddhism. They're allowed to talk to me about my religion. Which Bible are you taking as the factual version? Well, in our religion, we actually we have a text that is the original text, and I have it here, and it is in ancient Hebrew. Where'd I put it? Jeez, I think I put it in the other room, but Pinochet says, I just converted to Greek Orthodox. We need to be strong for the coming Crusades. I don't know if it's a joke or not, but I don't think that they were. I think they were actually victimized by the Crusades because the Latin, the Roman Catholics believed that they were wrong. Floyd and Pink says, isn't that verboten, like forbidden? Well, like I said, I believe in the religion as a whole, but I wouldn't say that I've adapted to all the laws and beliefs of the lifestyle. Okay, because I've never, I've tried to live in a society where Judaism is the norm. Pinochet says Ramon loses his Jewish text in response with I mean, that's the ultimate irony here. I mean, it's a live comedy, just watching what I do. Isn't that cherry picking? No, it's not cherry picking. The issue is, okay, and that's really a problem, and it's something that I talk about a lot. That yes, there are certain things that are talked about in the Bible that are explicitly forbidden, but there are other things that are not forbidden that throughout the ages have become forbidden, and then some things get debated. That's where the Talmud came into play. So the Torah was the actual scripture up until I think the Book of Chronicles. Have I ever read The Merchant of Venice? Sorry, no, I haven't read it. I think that's a play actually by Shakespeare. Um, so cherry picking, yes, there. If you look at the Talmud, if you look at the Mishnah, which the Talmud is based on, if you look at some of the later texts, and after this, I'm going to move topics, but one day we can do a different question and answer about this. You have to see that with every age, the sages, the rabbis, have to adapt to the modern times. Now, I don't know if cursing, and this is where I'm going to look like a moron. I don't know if cursing any time is considered a sin, but there's cases in the Bible of people cursing one another. Obviously, they didn't curse one another in English because it didn't exist at the time. The English language didn't exist in the biblical time. But the the idea of something being forbidden, the idea of something being a sin. Yes, I'd say that there's plenty of things that I do that are considered sins in Judaism and whatever, but it doesn't hold on. Somebody's asking about Merchant of Venice. Well, yeah, but what does Merchant of Venice have to do with this? In any case, there is this issue where why are certain things a sin? Why is it that something is forbidden and something else is permitted? Every religion has to deal with that. So I'm not coming here to tell you I am the paragon of the Jewish religion. I'm trying to tell you that for me, the idea that this identity is a cultural and national identity, and in some cases, a lot of these modern people, like Sarah Silverman, she says it's only a cultural identity for her. Well, then in my opinion, that's not a real identity, because throughout the ages, the culture really changes, especially given the fact that our people have lived in numerous different countries. Part of my family lived in Iraq, totally different country from the other part in Ukraine. So I think that the religious element is much more important than the cultural element. Now, me not being the perfect example of a religious person, and talking very coarsely and getting into, you know, Twitter fights or Facebook fights with that is, of course, that would be a flaw within the religion. But but it's still a factor in, you know, what it means to be a Jewish person. And you know, I think if you guys look at, I don't know if you guys are all Christian, but um, you know, what makes you a Christian? Uh, well, first of all, it would probably involve accepting a certain person as your Lord and Savior, right? Some people identify culturally as Christian, but they actually don't believe in the story. You know, they're very, you know, I don't know what to call it, abstract in their belief, and it's a major debate here in the USA. Um, Floyd and Pink, you're filibustering, to be honest. Sure, yeah, I am filibustering. What's your point? I mean, I'm not, I just explained that I believe that Judaism is a religious identity. It should not be a cultural identity. Does that make me the perfect representative of it? Of course not. Um, so the rapper says it is a play by Shakespeare and was passed off as a comedy in those days. Yeah, but yeah, what does that have to do with our discussion of religion? Pinochet says the people of the book have spawned all major religions except Buddhism and Hinduism. I mean, you have to remember there's other religions and, you know, indigenous religions throughout the world, and, you know, Taoism and whatever. And you know, I am somebody where I can accept that not everybody believes the way that I believe. Okay, so Floyd Pink says that's a straw man on the cherry picking question. Well, so what are you doing? You're throwing in all of the debate objections here in one thing, like first cherry picking, then straw man, then filibustering. Sure, I mean, okay, guilty of all of them. I'm like some sort of hell creature of both debating and Judaism. Okay, yeah, I wasn't here to introduce a debate. I was here to introduce a topic, and not to, you know, fine. um Bandsaw Bandit, isn't the definition Jesus Christ light and dark? I don't know. Uh, Pinochet says depends on who paints him. Bandsaw Bandit. Um, Rapper 10,000. What makes me a Christian is my faith and belief in you know, God and everything, and Jesus. So yeah. So there's a basic element to Christianity. There are basic elements to Judaism. You know, there's plenty of them, but you know, some people don't get that, and it's really an issue. Um, Chris Jones writes the Hebrew word for without. I don't know what he's talking about. Bandsaw Bandit says it's up to each individual to choose what they believe. Yeah, I think you know, if you're forced to believe something, if you're forced into a religion, whether it's and you know, we didn't even get into Islam yet. I know you guys are all huge fans of Islam, right? I don't know. Um, when you're forced into a belief system, I think it detracts from the actual spiritual value of it, and that's why, you know, I have done a couple videos that I call, you know, society and theology here, where I try to go into sort of why religions going into, you know, colliding with modern society, they kind of, there's a clash there, and you know, my conversation from right now is really um, about that, you know, society and theology. Floyd Pink says, I'm not trying to offend. I thought you might have had your usual concise answer on the cherry picking question. Um, Look, the cherry picking thing is really it is an issue with people who, you know, there's certain people, and you know, you could probably include me, that they look at certain commandments and they look at them as easier to fulfill than other ones. So, you know, absolutely, for me, not cursing, and I think you know, there are schools of thought that say you're not supposed to curse in Judaism. Here, there's no commandment against drinking, by the way, in Judaism. So, you know, those commandments that are easier for you, so you get more spiritual enjoyment from them. But it doesn't mean that you're not commanded to do a lot of other things that you probably don't find easy to do. You know, some people, I don't get along with my dad necessarily all the time. So the what is it, the fifth commandment of the Ten Commandments, because they're, you know, we think about the big Ten Commandments, but in Judaism we believe there's 613 total commandments just from Scripture. But you know, if you're talking about the Ten Commandments that most people think of, for some people the fifth commandment is very difficult, right? If you don't have a good relationship with your dad, sometimes, yeah, it can be difficult. So, what does that mean? You're a sinner if you fight with your mom or your dad or something? Well, that happens in a family. So, I'm going to look at the last few comments and then we're going to move on to South Africa. The Rapper 10,000 says, I reference the book because of the clash of the Old Testament that some Jewish people in those days versus mercy, which is what the New Testament that Christians believe. Yes, I'd have to really look at what is it, the Merchant of Venice you were talking about, because many people consider it an anti-Semitic play, but that's the way people thought in Middle Ages, in Renaissance England. So what are you expecting Shakespeare to write? You know, some sort of play that's like I don't know, Fiddler on the Roof or something. He's from Renaissance England. That's the way. They didn't even have Jews over there. There were just legends of them from before the 11th century when they were kicked out. So that was the way he thought. Now, yes, and another accurate thing that he's bringing from there, that Rapper 10,000 is talking about, is that there is a clear difference in values between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And you know, maybe we'll talk about that someday at greater length. But you know, I'll just introduce one theme. The idea of God always being merciful is not as common in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, in many cases, God is very vengeful. The book of Jeremiah, for example, is about horrific punishment being inflicted on the Judeans, the people of Judea. You know, if you watch the life of Brian, you know, you have the People's Front of Judea and the Front for the Liberation of Judea, and what, you know, I don't know if you guys watch Monty Python or whatever, but the Judeans in the book of Jeremiah, they're put completely through the ringer and just destroyed, and exiled to Babylon. And then God also does the same thing. He sends Jeremiah to prophesy doom, not just for the Judeans and for the Israelites, but for the Egyptians and a lot of other nations around there. And in the New Testament, it's kind of a pretty different value system. Yeah, there is a huge difference in the value systems between the two. I'd be glad to talk about that a different day. Bandsaw Bandit, any religion is based on faith alone. It's up to individuals to make sense to their core beliefs. Too many religions, in my opinion, are branches of different myths and fables. And many religions have bits of other religions and myths woven in. Rapper 10,000, it is always a clash of ideologies that keep us humans divided and at conflict. Yeah, but, you know, different cultures develop organically. Pinochet, how about them Levites? Am I right? Yeah, I don't know, but hope everything is okay with you over there. I think he's talking about somebody else. Bandsaw Bandit says 12 apostles represent the 12 segments of the year. I wouldn't. I really. I'm not a good authority on Christianity and the New Testament. So, you know, sometimes I'll talk about it, but I'll talk more about modern Christian movements, and you know, that's something I just have to acknowledge my ignorance on it. Now on to gun. Chris Jones, I'm trying to write the word for sin. Chata. That's close. You just have the wrong punctuation. So you guys want to hear about guns first. So also tonight, so I talked about Purim. That's how we got into the subject of religion. Also tonight, after I went to the Megillah reading, I drove down to my alma mater because a friend of mine said that there was an appearance by the the retired president of Gun Owners of America, Larry Pratt, and he was there, and I noticed that there was it was a smattering of there were some middle-aged white guys, some maybe five or six, and then a good 30 to 35 college age kids from Turning Point USA. You guys might know who they are. They're an organization led by Charlie Kirk here in the U.S. That they do a lot of good youth education about free market values and about the ideas of freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, capitalism. They're more of a conservative libertarian movement. Really good stuff. A lot of people like Ben Shapiro. He's good, but I think Charlie Kirk's even better. Half of atheists are pro-Islam. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Chris is in the building, by the way. I didn't acknowledge you yet. In any case, so we had a discussion there. I actually got to talk to Larry Pratt. I sent him the latest article that I wrote for Hard News Network, which, by the way, is in the description. And what really was going on, and I'll get to Rapper 10,000's question, which is relevant to the conversation, is that you have this guy who's clearly a senior citizen, talking very civilly with a lot of young people, and some of them were in the audience. They weren't very pro-gun, but they weren't the most intolerant of it. And he was talking about certain misconceptions that are going on. One of the key misconceptions is that the people who are talking about arming teachers are talking about mandatory arming for teachers. That's really absurd if you think about it. There's no way that the U.S. government can compel people to handle a weapon. And those of you that are saying the draft, remember there were conscientious objectors to the draft, and that was for a war. So Quakers, for example, there was what was the movie Hacksaw Ridge with Mel Gibson, was about an army medic that he made a commitment never to touch a gun. There's really people are really freaking out over nothing. And I had a talk with two teachers on Facebook, not a real talk. I wish I would have done a stream with them, but they didn't want to come onto a stream. And they were talking about this issue where they think, oh, this is a waste. Teachers have enough to worry about without being armed. No, there are already states where some teachers are armed, and therefore this idea that arming teachers would be a massive problem and a burden on the school systems. I can imagine in some school systems it would be, but look, if I look at it this way, if people have such a problem with arming teachers, then you move on to saying, well, maybe we should arm the janitors, right? Because who's in the school even more than the teacher? It's the other staff, the janitors, the cafeteria people. They wouldn't give a fuck. They probably, but yeah, sure, I'll take a fucking handgun. Who cares? I'm a janitor. All I do is clean up vomit. Now I have a handgun. Now I actually have some sort of authority to do something. You can have there's plenty of people in schools besides teachers that are perfectly capable of wielding a handgun. That they're basically everybody thinks that the most important people in the schools are the teachers. I mean, obviously, we live in a society. There's been very important figures who have performed other roles in schools, right? One comes to mind, and this is people just have to calm down and realize that teachers are they can't continue this whole bullshit where, oh, we have the hardest job in America. You might have a hard job, but then again, you don't have the hardest job in America. Imagine being one of these surgeons that some of these people, they work shifts that are insane hours. I've heard of ones that work 72-hour shifts. Yes, there's breaks, but you have to be in the same vicinity for 72 hours. That's insane. Um, so I'm gonna talk about Rapper 10,000's question. Do you agree with the NRA's statement on how the media thrives off of mass shootings for ratings, but ignores the shootings in places like Chicago? Well, I don't think that the NRA is the only organization that makes that argument. I would say that there's a lot of violence that goes unreported nationwide that doesn't happen in schools. That doesn't, there's a lot of, think about how much domestic violence goes unreported. Think about, I just picked up from the library, I don't have it here, I have it in the other room, a book that was recently published by a local reporter about the Anthony Sowell murders. Those were pretty big here in Ohio. I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, where this serial killer, this black guy, was killing black women who were, a lot of them were prostitutes, crack addicted prostitutes. Nobody cared, and it had nothing to do with guns. What are you supposed to do about that? That's a question never resolved here. Since then, there was another murderer, Michael Madison, I think his name was. Virtually the same type of profile and situation, same type of community, same type of victim. The only reason he was detected was because one of his victims happened to not be a prostitute. She happened to be, just a regular young woman, I think in her 20s, whose family cared enough to alert to bring out a search and try to find who abducted and murdered her. Okay, so this is really, it's an issue of, is every murder victim equal? I don't know. I think that the murder victim's value, unfortunately, and I might be talking, in a very detached and over rational manner here. Unfortunately, a murder victim's value is determined by who misses that murder victim more. Uh, as you know, some people get murdered that are, for example, drug traffickers. Do people really care when they get killed? Not as much, right? Um, that this is the part of society where people have to acknowledge that not everybody's equal, largely because not everybody lives in a situation where they're actually valued by the people around them. So I have to agree with Dana Lash, or whatever her name is, the NRA spokeswoman. But it goes even deeper than that. A murder victim, it depends on the circumstances. For example, there was a doctor, I believe, a few years ago here. I think it was a Lebanese man who poisoned his wife, and it was a bizarre situation, and it was very newsworthy. But people didn't think of it as a major tragedy, but it kind of is a major tragedy, isn't it? This guy marries this woman. Woman did not deserve it, to my knowledge. Murdered her. I think tried to flee the country. That it's pretty fucked up, right? Oh, sorry, Floyd and Pink. I guess I'm getting another burn from the flames. You know, um, yeah, it's a huge issue whether one murder or one mass murder is worse than another. There was a mass shooting here a few weeks ago where not every, only one person died, but I think 5 people were injured. Okay, is that a huge tragedy? Not according to the news. It barely made the news here. I think it made like one byline in one of the local TV stations. Nobody gives a shit about that. So yeah, I think that she has a great point. Pinochet says, "Look at what has happened to society since our rejection and vilification of religion." Enough said. Yes, I think that atheism becoming too much of you know a theme in a society. I think I find it to be a problem. But when you get to societies where the Spanish Inquisition, that was not a great time for Spain. You could talk about the 30 Years War in Germany. People being killed, Protestants versus Catholics killing each other. It's not exactly as if you end atheism, the problem disappears. I think you need a society based on liberty. I'll put it that simply. The belief in God or the non-belief of God is up to the individual. Um, what is a fully semi-automatic? That's not. There is nothing. It's either semi-automatic or fully automatic, dude. So, Barabbas Chagall, I think, thanks for tuning in. Trump was talking about this rapper 10,000. Trump was talking about arming a selected group of teachers, and only they know who is armed and who is not. That's why a student mass shooter can be handled till the police comes to prevent more deaths. Yeah, I think that there's more details to work out, but that's not. I mean, Trump is there are certain things he does that I think are stupid, but this is not one of them. I think this is actually fully possible. Okay, some of the other things he wants, like the gas tax. Fuck that. No gas tax, dude. This bump stock ban, I think, is irrelevant. I'm against it, but I think it's a stupid idea, and realistically, it's not really going to help anybody. How many murders are committed with bump stocks? Not that many. Pinochet says there's about 5 or 6 ideas that could be implemented simultaneously, but too much money is involved in politics. Some of these involve money, and some of them not as much. Chris Jones, how about you fire all the fucking therapists handing out drugs? Most of these therapists have tried to take their own lives. Now they are in charge of mental health. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, I don't know. That could be a problem. Isn't that the problem? Mental health, not the gun so much, says Floyd and Pink. Yeah, there's a massive issue with a lot of these shooters. And again, look at my article and Hard News Network. I have the link below. A lot of these shooters are autistic, and they end up not just using firearms. Some of them rig their own explosive devices, IEDs, basically. So, we think of IEDs being an issue that happens in Iraq, but the Columbine shooters had a lot of IEDs, by the way, propane bombs. They had pipe bombs. It was a major issue in that shooting. It just that everybody talks about the guns that they used. Nobody talks about the IEDs that they made. That's a major problem. Barabbas Jagal is like forcing people to get health care. Well, again, like I said earlier, neither Larry Pratt, who I saw earlier at the Gun Owners of America meeting, or almost anybody else is talking about forcibly having people wield a firearm. It's just not a good idea. By the way, I don't only believe that weapons, firearms are the solution. I think there's other solutions that can be, implemented as well. People should take martial arts training. Is that a problem? Why would that be a problem? Are you going to say now that teachers can't learn martial arts training? I think some teachers can. Some teachers probably can't. Everybody has their limits. But to say, teachers shouldn't be forced to do, or teachers shouldn't be expected, or teachers shouldn't be trusted to do something. Well, then what's the worth of the teachers? And like I said, if not the teachers, how about you arm the janitors, right? The janitor would have no problem, walking around with a shotgun or something. Pinochet, armed teachers, armed guards, lock up lunatics, harden the security, doors, window, etc., and stop advertising gun free. Yeah. I mean, basically, Pinochet's arguing for a Pinochet style solution, right? I mean, that's basically the way Pinochet would have done it in Chile. Bandsaw Bandit said mental wellness is a core reason for many things. Drugs, legal or illegal, are one symptom. Floyd and Pink says, I'm not judging you at all. It's just interesting how touchy you're getting, though. No, I'm having fun with this. You're talking about, you know, why do you curse if you, well, again, I think he put me in a funny position. That's why I'm having fun with it. Um, you know, the religion thing is something we could go on about for hours. And, you know, I'm not, I'm not getting touchy at all. I think you're getting touchy now, dude. Bandsaw Bandit, people looking for an out of their mundane, everyday brainwashed lives. Pinochet says, I'm mostly a fan of Reagan, but shutting down the mental institutions was a huge mistake. Rapper 10,000 says, we still have zero answers to the Vegas shooting, but this Parkland shooting is the call for more gun control laws, which lead to those shootings. Yeah, I saw that with Paul Joseph Watson was talking about that. Floyd and Pink says, isn't that the narrative, though? Mainstream media calling out fully semi-automatic rifles. Well, I mean, they fuck up the terminology all the time. You know, um, they don't know how to actually. I think there was another graphic that every time that there's a major gun tragedy, CNN or USA Today comes out with another ridiculous, graphic or representation. So last time I think they had an AR-15 with a chainsaw extension on it, which I think some troll had made it up and they picked it out. So that, which, you know, that's not practical in any way. You definitely don't want a large vibrating blade anywhere near your AR-15 barrel. Okay, first of all, it would be. I mean, I guess you could do one or the other at any time, but first of all, it's a tremendous amount of weight. But whatever, it's ridiculous enough. Let me see if I can get that graphic. So they had. This was a real thing. I couldn't believe it. First of all, most chainsaws I think are a little too long. I mean, there's no chainsaw that I think is for sale that actually would fit on most AR-15s anyway, by the size. You know, I mean, even with an adapter. So it was a pretty hilarious one. Now this time, so that was last time. I think that was around the time of the Sutherland Springs shooting, which happened in Texas in November. Um, but okay, so this time they were comparing. They were saying that AR-15s are more dangerous because the muzzle velocity of the bullets was like 2,000 to 3,000 feet per second, as opposed to for handguns, which is like 700 to 800 feet per second, meaning that you could conceivably dodge a handgun bullet, but not so much a bullet from an AR-15. That was the new one. So think about that. Bandsaw Bandit, the whole gun debate is rubbish, has absolutely zero to do with the problems. I think you're right. And you're from Australia. Everybody brings up Australia. I don't think Australia necessarily solved all their issues. I could be wrong, but I hear about a lot of problems there with crime that were not solved by the, whatever gun legislation they enacted in the 90s. Rapper 10,000 says, I have autism too, but never thought of killing people. I think the teachers misdiagnose kids, mainly boys with mental illnesses, to make their jobs easier. Your thoughts? Yes, I actually have somebody in my family that has gone through that. He has a lot of the issues that you're talking about, misdiagnosed many times. It's definitely affected our family. And like I said, a lot of the shootings that I talked about in my article, which you'll see in the description, there were people who fit that type of profile. These people who are autistic spectrum disorder patients, I guess you could call them, who were very alienated, and the school system was ignorant of how to actually adapt them to their curriculum. So yeah, it's true, and I know it's true. I know it's true from both looking at the topic, and I know it's true from people that I know, and this is not a deflection. It's an actual problem. in the school system. And if they want to say, oh, it is the guns, stop talking about mental health, then the answer should be, well, when do you want to talk about mental health? Because when the shootings come up, you're saying we don't want to talk about guns. Now, how about let's wait 2 months, then we say, okay, we talked about guns for 2 months. Now, can we talk about mental health? I guarantee you, none of them will give a shit, because it is a pharmaceutical industry issue. It is an issue of defending the failing education system, which they have no intention of changing, because it provides stupid and impressionable people that watch their shows. I like this. Pinochet says, when I was in school, ADD was called BOY. Yeah. Um, Chris said my solution to ADHD was to learn everything. Now, I myself was never diagnosed with a learning disorder, but I was definitely the type of person who, I would cut school all the time. When I went to school, when I was actually in the building, I would cut class all the time. I don't know if there's a disorder that is, but you know, they haven't made an educational system that is compelling enough to actually draw people to stay focused to it. So that's it for that topic. Now, South Africa. I have this article from Information Liberation uh, through Paul Joseph Watson, and they're talking about Zimbabwe 2.0. And those of you that maybe you watch Lauren Southern or something, I don't talk as much about the South Africa issue and the white farmers, but I'm not going to ignore it, because I do believe that multiculturalism in the Western world has been responsible for this uptick in racial violence. Okay, now let me be clear here. Okay, I don't support the apartheid system that was in South Africa in the past. I do believe in a fully in the one person, one vote vision that was the goal of the opponents of apartheid traditionally. Okay, their goal was not to remove white South Africans, whether they're Afrikaners or British, from the southern, the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa. Their goal was to create a society where every person was equal under the law. And what happened with South Africa? It says Zimbabwe 2.0. South Africa votes to confiscate white minorities' land without compensation. So that's the exact opposite of what was the vision of the apartheid opponents under apartheid, whether they're the people from the ANC, who, by the way, are not the great people that people think of. Oh, the ANC, Mandela or whatever. Well, Mandela might have been a relatively decent guy. A lot of the people in the ANC were always racial bigots, but I think that even the ANC for many years was still operating under the provision that in their future South Africa, all people would be permitted to live there under an equal system. Whether it is white people, the different black nations of South Africa. There's the Xhosa. There are the Zulu, the Tswana. There's a number of other ones. I can't remember them all. There's also the Cape Coloreds. Sorry, but that's what they're called. Those are the descendants of white and black people in South Africa. And then there are Indian South Africans from the Indian subcontinent. And then there are South Africans that come from countries like Nigeria. I think that's a little more recent. And then there's actually people from East Asia, I believe from China, that came during the British rule of South Africa. And the reason that South Africa has gone to the shitter is because the West has allowed itself to go to the shitter too. If countries like Britain had maintained their commitment to British Enlightenment values, again, banning censorship. I don't know about banning censorship is the wrong term, but not engaging in censorship, not engaging in multicultural garbage, where you have this importation of immigrants from third world countries, sending foreign aid there, starting foreign wars there, and basically creating this cycle of violence and migration and poverty. Then Britain would have been a much stronger country. And people who are thought of as bigots in Britain from the 70s and 80s, who were saying, well, immigration is not going to help our country. It's probably not going to help the immigrants. Yes, some people from the West Indies, they're Commonwealth citizens. Okay, maybe they can come. We're not going to take the entire friggin' British Commonwealth into our country because Britain's not that big of a country. Well, those people were looked at as racist and disgusting bigots and stuff. Well, look who had the last laugh. Okay, unfortunately, Britain's BBC and other authorities, Ofcom, the Office of Communications, and I talk about that in my article about gun control, that it's not just an issue of guns, it's an issue of freedom of expression. The British, they may have given us a lot of their Enlightenment values. And some of you are from other Commonwealth countries, and I maybe it would have been better if America would have been somehow in the Commonwealth, but in one way it's better that we're not. We have the First Amendment enshrined in our Constitution. Britain didn't. Okay, I don't know how it works in Australia and New Zealand or in Canada. Canada, for fuck's sake, they don't even give a shit about any freedoms anymore. They're like basically some sort of frog creature from multicultural hell now. Unfortunately, with Justin Trudeau, Mr. Bollywood now. No, America, we embraced the First Amendment. We embraced the Second Amendment because we believed that individuals were the people who would determine the course of this society as a free one, as opposed to being one that's dependent on centers of authority and some sort of central dictatorship, which is the way that other countries have become. Now, I know what you're thinking, that you're just being some sort of America firster or American exceptionalist. Welcome, Angel. Thanks for tuning in again. But no, that's not the case. What we have here in the U.S. is the First Amendment, which unfortunately is being eroded by our state illegally, but it still guarantees people like myself and other people in the U.S. the ability to dissent from the official line of our government, whether it's, and that could be the intelligence services, it could be Congress, it could be President Trump. Plenty of people. Don't you find it funny how people are calling President Trump a dictator, but none of them end up in prison for saying that? Okay, they might end up possibly in prison for other crimes that are unrelated to their speech, because we have the First Amendment here. And what South Africa did with the confiscation of land, I guarantee you that they would not have, if Britain had been under a similar system that they were up until the mid 1970s, one that was based on the cultural values of the British people. No, South Africa would never have done that. This is a disgrace. And I've had conversations with some Pan-Africanists who are saying, "Well, this is of course justice. This is us getting back the land that our ancestors were that they had stolen from them by these interloping Boers, the Afrikaners." That, in my opinion, is the final exposure of the racism of the left. Okay, and these people are on the left. They're first of all, the Pan-Africanists. They may be nationalist leftists or whatever. They believe in Africa uniting and becoming some sort of a racial motherland for all black people. Well, how are they going to do that? You've already had people who have been in that type of type of way of thinking in Africa before. Idi Amin in Uganda, he came to power. He basically said, you know, we're going to be an anti-colonialist state. We're going to expel not only the British advisors to the previous administration, Milton Obote, who was the first Ugandan president, who was also a nationalist, but not as extreme. He was not only going to expel those British advisors, he expelled the Indian merchants who were living in Uganda. So what did that result in? Well, a couple years after that, he started killing a couple of the sub-nations of Uganda, the Akoli and the Lengo. You could look this up. I'm not making any of this up. He started murdering them systematically and basically killing, you know, it was basically a genocide. And, you know, nobody gives a fuck about that. People think that, this is Africa. We shouldn't be involved in their matters. Well, you know, if we don't want to be involved in their matters, then that's up to the world. Okay, we let this happen in Rwanda. We let it happen in Sudan. That again is part of the Western lie that they would never let another Holocaust happen. That's something that all of these well-wishing idiots, like Hillary Clinton and that UN ambassador from Obama, Samantha Power. They were always talking about, oh, we'll never let another Holocaust or another genocide happen. Well, they do it all the time, and this will be this will be just another case, and it's despicable. It's despicable that they're actually going to let a country do this. And it was despicable when they let Rwanda do it. It was despicable. It was despicable when they let Syria do it. And in Syria, they had participation from all these other countries. You know, Russia, the United States, Saudi Arabia. All of them are complicit in that massive clusterfuck that is called Syria. And the answer to all of these issues is not to trust in the UN, which is another multicultural bullshit factory. The answer is to say, we're the United States. We're not going to take immigrants from any country that is basically forcing people out. We're gonna, and if necessary, we're gonna go in there and basically end our commercial relationships with you. And you know, I hope it doesn't come to war. I think that should be the last resort. Once in a while, you do have to do it. I think it would have been acceptable to me, looking back today, if we would have gone to war in Rwanda. I think that would have been worth it. You know, it might have been probably, first of all, Rwanda is a pretty tiny country, but you know, I could be wrong. But this whole premise that in South Africa they have this right to evict farmers because you know, historically these white people do not belong in Africa. Well, is that going to create a better country? South Africa is already suffering from a monumental drought in the Cape Province, Western Cape Province, which is where Cape Town is. They're already suffering from massive urban poverty since apartheid ended. And the corruption is just getting worse. And they just had to remove their president who was corrupt, Jacob Zuma. And their new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, isn't exactly the cleanest politician. It's just the same. It's the same lady, different dress. That's how they say. So I think I'm gonna leave for today. I'll take one last look at the comments. I saw some of you might have gone to bed or something, but sorry. Pinochet is saying bye. Bye. Have a good night. South Africa is dying a slow death. Too late to save it. That horse is bolted. That's Floyd and Pink. Yeah, it is sad, and it's sad for all the South Africans, but obviously more for the white South Africans for obvious reasons. But it will be also worse for the black South Africans in the long run too, because you know, ultimately you can't replace skilled people. when you don't have somebody to take up their role, and they don't yet. Bandsaw Bandit says freedoms are being eroded by the Islam-loving LGBT QWERTY so-called community here in in Australia. Absolutely, they're a bunch of weirdos. The gay rights movement is the fakest movement in the world. They don't believe. All they believe in is self gratification and telling other people how not to hate other people. I don't need you to tell me how to hate or not hate anybody else. By the way, Zimbabwe is trying to attract their white farmers back in. What this could result in South Africa is that South Africans might just whoop, move into Zimbabwe and start opening businesses there or something. Could happen. I don't know if it will. Rapper says other world leaders in Europe, like Merkel, are the true fascist leaders, not Trump. How many agree? Yeah, I think Merkel is definitely some sort of. I don't know what fascism means in this context, but she's definitely not a democratic leader. She's some sort of a big statist moron who, she's the head of a quote unquote conservative party, the Christian Democratic Union. But look at their actions, not their words. They're not very conservative at all. Bandsaw Bandit says, just wait till South Africans run out of water. A shitstorm is coming. So then Chris says a lot of stuff about globalists and bigger state, bigger government. Flame Pink says UN is a toothless, worthless joke. 100% agree. I think we agree on that all the way. Chris Jones says they want a European Union army. Yeah, that's true, and they never talk about it, but they do. Rapper 10,000 says, have you heard about these moms demand action groups who support this anti-gun narrative but have never held one? Well, let's think about that. That's something I thought about doing a part of a video earlier, and I thought better of it because I needed to do some other stuff. But moms demand action. So you're talking about these people. Think about a mom, and my mom's gone. Rest in peace. But I loved her. I still do. But she did not know anything about weapons and did not know anything about safety. And why would you take people who always tell you that's what moms do? They always tell you, don't do things that aren't safe. Well, they also tell you never to take risks and never to do things that might end up being, fortuitous for you. So Bandsaw is logging off. See ya, Bandsaw. But yeah, and thanks for the kind words. Anyway, one last point with the moms demand action. It's really a problem when people think, oh, because I have a child, that gives me the privilege of telling other people how to buy or do something else. Whether it has to do with drinking, whether it has to do with doing any drugs. I'm not pro drug, but when you have a group like Moms Demand Action talking about which laws to put in place. Well, first of all, they're not very coherent in what action they want. I'm sure that they have some sort of platform. I'll take a quick look at their website right now, but it's Moms Demand Action for gun sense in America, and most of their stuff, and I can't see here, and I might be, I might have to like actually explore this website, but on the tabs, and I'll show it to you, there really isn't anything about what they see as the solution. They're just saying it's time for Gun Sense America, throw them out, kick out lawmakers beholden to the gun lobby. So what they're not for any specific law, to my knowledge. Okay, and I could be wrong again. I'm just looking here on the fly. But their main message is that we're the anti-NRA, and um, that's not an argument, as Stefan Molyneux would say. And none of this is an argument. How many irrational conversations have you had with your mom when you said, "Look, mom, this isn't the end of the world. I bought a rap album. I bought in my time it was Busta Rhymes, who I kind of don't like Busta Rhymes anymore. Or I bought a Corn album. Don't freak out. Uh, this is uh, just nonsense. And when they have groups like that, they sound good, but they actually don't mean much. So that's my final word. I see you guys are that you have to go home, and I'm going to log off too. Have a great night. Hope to hear from you later. And you can join me on Friday. I'm going to have a stream about midday, 1 o'clock. Until then, I don't know. But you're welcome to join me anytime. That's all for tonight. And comment below, share, subscribe, and keep up your commenting.